John. So I'm going to talk a little bit about agriculture water demand, as John mentioned. But before I do that, I will just tell you a little bit about the agenda for this presentation. I guess I can try to be down there. Why agriculture irrigation is important in British Columbia, irrigated agriculture. How much water does agriculture use today, especially in the lower mainland here? And what will agriculture use in the future? And before I start that, I want to show you some slides. This is what BC's grain food lands look like. This is our ranch lands where we grow beef. Our dairy lands in the Fraser Valley where we get our milk, cheese, eggs. Our forage and berry lands where we get our berries and forage crops, strawberries, vegetables, fruits and vegetables in the Okanagan. And if there's one thing that you notice when you look at these pictures, that the landscape is big. It's all big. So if you look at what's happening in British Columbia as far as our food consumption, and I won't go through the entire table, but the bottom line is we produce 48% of the food that we eat in this province. Only, not even half. We have to get the food from elsewhere. So what's concerning to me a little bit is I was reading in the Vancouver Sun an article over the last few years about food security in BC and how we are converting our parking lots over to growing vegetables, parking lots in Vancouver, maybe a half a dozen or whatever, and it's part of our food security plan for the province. And I just showed you how big you can fit an awful lot of parking lots in that area. And so the point that I'm making is it's great to grow food in parking lots, converting and having people grow their own food. They'll find how difficult it is to grow your own food. They learn a lot. There's lots of good things for the local people, but it's not about food security in the province of British Columbia. If you look at the United Kingdom, an area that does do market gardens, and they have a high demand for market gardens, and they have something like 3,000 to 4,000 of them in the United Kingdom, and a population of 50 million people. Those 4,000 with about 2,000 to 3,000 pendings, they want to get into that, only produces 1% of the food for the United Kingdom. That's 4,000 of them. We have 5 small ones, or 10, or whatever the number is in Metro Vancouver. It's not producing our food. It's not about food security. And so I like the fact that we're doing this stuff, but one of the things that I want to make sure that we're messaging, and I heard the mayor of Vancouver say that this is good stuff, it's all about food security in BC. No, it's not. Where you're going against your food security when you're putting in 2 one-acre parking lots and you're removing 150 hectares of land at the port, that's affecting our food security. It's not about building food into local urban areas and getting rid of the large parcels of agricultural land that we have. That is a fallacy, and the messaging is wrong, and what happens is people read the paper, and you know what the public goes, I read in the paper, we got things converting, we don't need the ALR, we got things happening in parking lots now, and we can produce our food that way. So it's a big part of where this presentation is going, is where does our food come from? And if we want to become secure in British Columbia for where our food comes from, we have to grow more locally, and it's going to mean that we need more irrigated land. Probably we irrigate about 180,000 hectares today. We probably have to get up to around 250,000 hectares of irrigated land, and we're going to have to start growing a lot of food in a lot of the other agricultural lands that we have. We're going to need water. You cannot grow food without water. So that's a really important message. So, flipping to what I'm really going to talk about is this water demand model we developed. And it started in the Okanagan in about 2004. And some of you probably know a little bit of background about this already, but there's a lot of people here that don't, so you're just going to have to bear with me while I go through some of the background. Okanagan region is the canary in the coal mine. That's the area where we have a high population growth if you compare it to the rest of Canada. We have a large agriculture industry. It's under climate change. We're going to go through you heard John Bob Sanford this morning talk about how things are going to change, hydrology. It's all about hydrology in the Okanagan. We get our water now, not from Okanagan Lake, like you see in the picture here. Most of the water for agriculture, when you get north of Penticton, comes out of reservoirs in the hills that rely on snowmelt to fill the reservoirs up in the summertime. When that snowpack disappears and it's rainfall, we're going to have bigger reservoirs because we're going to have to go into the reservoirs earlier because we don't have snowmelt to rely on to feed the water. So it's a huge change in how the hydrology in that region is going to work. And it's a really good place to start looking at what climate impacts are going to have. Because there's a lot of agencies doing work in the Okanagan because they see what's happening there. It's a good place to do these kind of studies. So, the Okanagan area, 85% of our water goes to one type of irrigation or another. 65% goes to agriculture, 20% goes to landscapes. You do not have to be a rocket scientist just sitting in the room hearing that. We're going to manage water in the Okanagan. We're going to have to start to manage our irrigation better. It's not about the domestic use. But we have a growing domestic population that's going to need more water. And of course, they're going to turn around and say, hey, we can maybe get agriculture to be more efficient, and we'll take the water from there. But we have a lot of agricultural land in the Okanagan that is not good for anything unless we can get water to it. Because it's a dry region, and you can't grow dry land farming there for the most part. A bit of forage in the north, you can do a bit of cereals, but certainly not your fruits and vegetables. So we're going to need more water in the Okanagan at the same time that we have less, and at the same time that we have a growing population. That tells you we need to start figuring this stuff out. So back in 2006, Denise Nielsen and myself, and there are people in this room here that were part of this project. Stephanie, Andrew, there's some others in the room that were all part of this project and getting the information together to determine what are we going to need for agriculture. And that's an important question. We decided we've got to find out how much agriculture really needs and what it's going to need in the future and what it's going to need if we change crops or change systems to be more efficient. And how are we going to answer those questions quickly? And that's where the water demand model started to be developed. 2003, we talked about that already. It was the teachable year. We had droughts, we had fires, City of Kelowna was burning up. This is a picture of the fire around the City of Kelowna. You can see the smoke fringe there. A huge teachable moment. At about the time, a year or two later, that we started looking at developing this tool. So the agricultural water demand model, we decided to do that, to get a good handle on that, we had to be able to calculate something on a property by property basis, and we had to be accurate on every property. We had to know the crops, the irrigation system types on the property, where they sat, so we could have a tool that was really quite accurate. And if we did it on a property by property basis, we could extend the tool to any groundwater area, local government, an irrigation district, a watershed. We'd have that capability. So the crux behind all of this is a land use inventory, a detailed land use inventory, a huge undertaking. Not something you can do very quickly. In the Okanagan, we've just resurveyed the entire Okanagan Valley. The cost of that was $200,000, all paid for by the Okanagan Basin Water Board because they had the survey done in 2006, 2007, and they wanted to see how changes were happening to the landscape. And we're talking about the agricultural landscape here. So it was resurveyed. So this is not a small undertaking. It takes a lot of crews, it takes a lot of effort. Teresa, when we're going to do Metro Band, it's not simple to do. It can be done, but it takes a lot of effort to go out and resurvey the areas. At this point in time, we don't have satellite technology to kind of pick up all the information that we're looking for. So what you end up with the land use inventory, and I'll give a little summary here. You see a yellow box. Pretend the yellow box is your property boundary. And within the yellow box, you're growing apples and you're growing forage. And so there's blue lines separating the apples at the top and the forage at the bottom. And you'll see another blue line separating out the farmstead, the house, the yard, which we're not irrigating for agriculture. We see take that out so we know exactly the area that's actually being farmed. If those apples have a sprinkler system on part of it and a drip system on the other part, we need to know that. So the survey said, oh, it's over here, so another blue line goes in and separates it, so we now know what kind of crop and what kind of irrigation system is in every one of those blue parcels. And we calculate the water demand for each parcel, and then add them up to get the water demand for the entire property, and then add up all the properties to get the water demand for the entire region. So if you look at Metro Vancouver as an example, we end up with a bunch of map sheets that do this land use inventory. This is done in a GIS lab in the Ministry of Agriculture where they digitize everything they can onto map sheets. The map sheets that we see in the top left-hand corner. These map sheets go in a vehicle with a student, with a GIS, all the information on the database, and a professional person. They drive by every property. We do not go on the property, but we drive by the property, and they know which property they're at, and they can now look out and say, what we have digitized in here, is it correct? And a lot of times it's not, and they have to make an adjustment right on the map sheet saying, no, that's not what we see, this is actually what's happening. Those map sheets all come back into the office, and then the data gets updated into the database. And once we're all done with all that, that data goes over to our modeler and uses that for the water demand model. So we have now, soils is also in the database, but now we have soils, crop, irrigation system type. If anybody knows anything about irrigation, you have to know something about the climate. What's happening with the climate to be able to calculate how much water we're actually using. This was a lot of work. We started down a number of different paths. It starts with looking at the weather stations, climate stations that we have. We then would call downscaling, where we start looking at what happens between those climate stations, what's happening in elevation, other parameters, and we recalculate the evapotranspiration rate, which is the crop demand, on a 500-meter grid. So this number is changing every 500 meters as we go through a valley or we go up the Okanagan. Adjacent grid cells don't have much of a change, but as we move further away, they do. We started with the University of Lethbridge. We worked with the University of BC. We finally finalized work with the University of Victoria at PKIC. And PKIC developed all these 500-meter grid cells with data to the year 2100, 500-meter grids, 2100, and we also have global climate models built into this thing that take us to the year 2100. So a huge database, daily data to the year 2100, allows us to run all kinds of stuff, and I'm going to present some of the information here in a minute. What we don't do with the climate grid cells, we don't separate out properties. We just assign a property to a grid cell, saying property number 1 in yellow is going to be assigned to climate grid cell the one up top there. It's mainly in climate grid cell number 1, so we assign that property to that, and it stays with that grid cell forever. So because the grid cells, adjacent climate grid cells don't change a lot, so that'll be fairly accurate. And then I get this question. How good is this model? Will it actually do a good job of tracking water use or calculating the demand of water use? So we had one district in the Okanagan, the Southeast Kelowna Irrigation District, where all the farmers are totally metered, and they could tell us what their water use was over a number of years. And then we ran the model over a number of years. And the model actually did a pretty good job of mimicking what the farmers were actually using until we hit that magical year 2003. And in 2003, our model is quite a bit higher than you see the yellow line, which is lower. Well, that's because the Southeast Kelowna Irrigation District said, we're in a drought, we have a water supply problem, we're limiting you all to 80% of your water use. And so some farmers stopped irrigating, reduced their water use. Of course, the model, we didn't tell the model to reduce it by 20% or adjust for climate. So it's just telling us what we need and what actually use was less. But we feel the model is doing a fairly good job of determining water demand. Don't look at all these numbers. The point I'm trying to get across is that this is the report you get. A lot of detail, where the water's coming from, how much water it is. What you really want to see is all the different crops that we can tell you information on. You know, we'll know information about apples, berries, blueberries, nurseries, mushrooms, greenhouses, forages. It gets broken down to a lot of detail. So we know exactly what is grown, we know exactly what is irrigated, we know exactly how much water each one of those crops needs for the kind of system that they're using. So I've summarized some data here, and there's some interesting bits of information here. Metro Vancouver, is there a pointer on this thing?
No, middle button.
Middle button. Metro Vancouver, irrigated area, 13,000 hectares. Fraser Valley Regional District, irrigated area, 15,300 hectares, for a total of 28,300 hectares of irrigated land in the Fraser Valley. The Okanagan, the entire Okanagan, 20,000. We have more irrigated land in the Fraser Valley than we do in the entire Okanagan Valley, by far. And that's not something that anybody knew before we started doing this work. We always felt, oh, Okanagan's hot and dry, everybody's irrigating. Fraser Valley, we have some irrigation, true, but probably would be more than the Okanagan, but it's way more. We also have the total area in hectares. You can see we're only irrigating 13,000 out of 28,000 hectares in Metro Vancouver, 15,000 out of 38,000 hectares in the Fraser Valley. The number one crop irrigated in Metro Vancouver is blueberries, and it will be on drip systems for the most part. There's a lot of forage, but we're not irrigating as much forage. We flip to the Fraser Valley Regional District. Yes, we have a lot of blueberries. Total irrigated, not as many as, there's still blueberries that aren't irrigated, but our bigger crop that's irrigated in the Fraser Valley is forage. And that will be irrigated with things like traveling guns and sprinklers, which are not as efficient as the drip systems we have on the blueberries. We can also look at the demand. And ironically, when you look at the demand for the Fraser Valley Regional District and Metro Vancouver, they come up with the same numbers, 441 millimeters on average, which is about that much water on the fields for each region. But the demand for the crops are very similar. There's a slight changes in here, but the climate isn't that drastic. And of course, we're also taking into account irrigation systems. So just because they flukily add up to be the same, they're not always exactly the same. But we know we can convert this to say how much water do we really need. So looking at drip irrigation systems, in Metro Vancouver, I already mentioned that blueberries were drip irrigated, so we have a lot of drip irrigation systems, not as much in the Fraser Valley Regional District. Traveling guns, I mentioned forages, a lot of traveling guns in the Fraser Valley Regional District, which are forages and inefficient systems. There's only one more system that's more inefficient than that. And there's good reasons why those systems are used, because dairy farmers use them to irrigate, but dairy farmers use them for applying their manure as well. So there's reasons why farmers select what they have, but it doesn't always fit into irrigation efficiency. If we look at the total demand, Fraser Valley Regional District, and now we can start looking at years. Okay, 2003 was a hot, dry year, 67 million cubic meters. 1997, it's about half. It was a wet year. So obviously the demand is going to fluctuate, and somebody mentioned earlier today, unfortunately what happens is the year that we need a lot of water for agriculture, for irrigation, is also going to be the year that we don't have a lot of water because it's a dry, hot year, which makes sense, right? Metro Vancouver, 60 million cubic meters to 36 million cubic meters. If we look at, one of the things that we could also do is we know every property that has an irrigation system, so we can look at where the supply comes from. So we say, okay, you're located in Delta, let's say. We know you're being supplied by Delta municipality. We'll call that an irrigation purveyor, so you get assigned a purveyor. We also know where the water licenses are, so we start looking up the water licenses to the properties that are irrigated. And then we're left with an awful lot of properties that are irrigating that do not have a water license, and they are not connected to a water supply by a local government. And then we know that farmers would never take water illegally, so therefore we know that these are all groundwater sources. So we're just making the assumption, no license, no water purveyor, you're getting it from groundwater. Probably not 100% correct, but probably pretty close. So now we can look at, groundwater in the Fraser Valley, much higher use than in the Metro Vancouver region. And water purveyors, Metro Van, a lot of the water comes from Richmond, Delta, Maple Ridge, Surrey. We're also supplying water into those areas. So they have a lot of it being supplied by a local government. Fraser Valley also has a lot through the city of Abbotsford. What else would be? I guess Chilliwack has a little bit, but not as much as the Metro Van region. So really interesting information when you start coming down to looking at water planning, water resources, where's it coming from, where does it have to go, all that kind of stuff. We can also ask the model things like this. All those green areas are current irrigation systems in the Fraser Valley. We can ask the model something like, okay, there's a bunch of land here that's not irrigated. As long as it's with 1 kilometer or no higher than this, a distance from a water source, we could irrigate it in the future. Tell me what all those lands are. That's all these red areas. So we can irrigate a lot more land in the regional districts of both Metro Van and Fraser Valley. In Metro Vancouver, if we build out, we go from 13,000 hectares to 35,000 hectares. We're going to be almost, well, it's about 2.5 times higher on irrigation demand. Fraser Valley Regional District, we're going to be able to double that. If we built the infrastructure, that's the key. We need to build the infrastructure, then we can irrigate more land, and that would get us closer to food security. Obviously, your demand also goes up. Now, about the demand. That 140 million cubic meters, the Fraser River supplies that in 5 hours at the Mission Bridge during a freshet. Sounds like a lot of water, but there's an awful lot of water coming down the Fraser River. The problem is, it's not always coming down when we need it. But there is no water supply problems on the Fraser River. For the amount of water that agriculture needs, we could take it out of the Fraser River if we built the infrastructure. We do have an issue, though, if we want to get that water through the municipal infrastructure, through Metro Vancouver or any other local government. We don't have that infrastructure capability to supply farmers with water through the municipal infrastructure. So this graph shows what work done at the Summerland Research Station. They took the water demand model, they ran it to the year 2100 for the current cropping. They ran all 12 global climate models, and you get a scatter of a whole bunch of information. And what you can see on that, because every one global climate model isn't exactly right, but what you can see on that is there's definitely a trend increasing. We're going to need more water as we move into the future to sustain our crops. That's pretty evident. The question really is how much more? And you can look at this and it comes out with 13, 15% more or whatever. I do have a few results I can show you on that. I also want to show you one other thing here. We got the model running for the Peace River. We have not done a land use inventory for the Peace River because it's a huge area, and that's something we're still looking at how to do that. But what we can do is run the model and default it to a crop and say, just pretend everything's cereal crop, entire Peace River. And let's pretend we're irrigating everything with sprinklers. Show me, what is our water demand, irrigation demand for that scenario, and we get a result that looks like that. Then we ran it for 2050 in the future, and we got that result. And you can see the differences in colors. So for a cereal crop on a sprinkler system, jumping ahead to 2050 from what we're doing today, you can see there's an increase in demand. We're doing a study in the Peace River now about irrigation feasibility. It is still not feasible to irrigate in the Peace River unless you are close to a water source and you have a relatively high value crop. But in the future, maybe you have to irrigate. And then we have a real issue because we don't have a lot of water in the Peace River. We maybe have a lot of water behind the new Peace River Site C dam, but that's not going to be able to irrigate the entire Peace River. So climate change is really going to have an impact on things in the Peace River. And for them to become profitable on our food lands up there, and they're huge, is we're going to need to have a higher value crop. They're going to have to get more for their crop to be able to afford to put the irrigation in to grow those foods. So here's some results for the Metro Van region when we look at global climate model changes. We'll use the 13,000 hectares we ran the model, and Stephanie, who was sitting in the back of the row there, has a problem with these charts, and you'll see her, she ran the model for me. It has, an average, depending on the climate change model you use, you're getting different numbers. And every climate change model gives you a low and a high. So the peak percentage increase from 2003, we look at this particular RCP, it's a 22% increase, 2050. These other ones, 27. This one's very high, it says 63%. If we average those peaks, it's 37%. But if we look at it in a different way and say, why don't we average all the runs of the model? Like, because you take 2050, you say, okay, what year in 2050? 2051, 2053, 2056. So we started looking at hot, dry years, and we started running a number of years, and then we ran a number of models, and we started averaging them. And the numbers come down then, of course, because we're no longer looking at a peak value. But you start getting an average, and you're still looking at a high average of 30% increase, but probably a more reasonable increase of about 9 or 10% as a maximum average for 2050. So that's still 10% more water than what we need today. And we can accommodate that by becoming more efficient on a lot of crops. Not all crops, some crops we can't do that, but certainly on our fruits and vegetable crops, we can become more efficient through scheduling that. We can probably accommodate that 10% change. So let's look at Delta. 6,300 hectares today is what the area of Delta is. 4,235 hectares of that have some kind of an irrigation system. Not saying that all the farmers are irrigating to the full potential, but our survey says, it sounds like, what is it, what's that show? Survey says? Family Feud, that's what it is. Our survey said we had 4,235 hectares out there with irrigation. 2.6 cubic meters per second is what we would need to supply that. If we went to a full build-out of Delta of 6,300 hectares, we would need almost 4 cubic meters per second. The current pump capacity in Delta is 3.5 cubic meters per second. With climate change at 10%, we would be at 4.3 cubic meters per second. The pump that's been installed today at 88th Street is 3 cubic meters per second, and we have a couple of other small pumps, so we're very close. But the problem is, we're assuming that those pumps can run when they have to, and we're assuming that the salinity wedge doesn't come in and have to have the pump shut down for a period of time. That's an issue, right? Yes, we have storage in the ditches, we can accommodate some of that, but that's one of the channels now about modeling and looking in the future. How far can we go to do this? And I don't think this 6,300 hectares, you probably correct me on this, does that include Western Highland? I think it does. The Western Highland is on top of this. So we've got another group of farmers with a fairly significant portion of land that have no irrigation water and no good supply currently, which I think we all want to get water to those areas as well. Some real challenges as we start looking forward: climate change, Fraser River flows, salinity wedges, operating times on pumps, ditch capacity. The pumps right now have 3 cubic meter per second capacity, but the ditch capacity isn't always there to push that through. And so there's maintenance issues that Delta has to deal with. It's not so easy. Everybody thinks, well, let's just do this, let's do that. It's not always that easy. But I have faith in the team of people that are working on it, and I give you guys a lot of credit too. You guys do a lot of good job. Good job for the farmers there. But there's certainly challenges. So that leads me to my final thing. So we have the water demand model. It runs across the province. We can run it for any crop. We can default it to a crop. We have groundwater, and if you've been paying attention to the new Water Sustainability Act, the province is going to license groundwater in January 2016. And 20,000 farmers have to come in the door and get a license. And the farmers said, well, I need a license, but how much water do I need? How am I going to calculate it? And Water Management Branch has challenges with this themselves about how to calculate how much water a farmer would need. So the farmers asked us, they asked the province to say, hey, can we develop a tool that will help us determine how much water we need? And the province came back to the Partnership for Water Sustainability and asked us questions, and we said, yes, I think we can do that. So we're going to do this for groundwater, which actually means we can do it for all licenses and all water. So the way it will work will be this. You will go to a website where you'll see a map of BC. You will click on that map of BC and zoom in. And as you zoom in, your property comes up. You kind of know where you are, and also you see all the cadastre. You say, oh, that's my property right there. And you'll also see these grid cells, which has the data for the water demand model. The water demand model, we're going to run it on forage crops for sprinkler systems. So when you click on that map in one of those cells, you immediately will get a number for what the water demand is for that entire property. And as you click on another portion of the map where the grid cell is a little bit different, you might get a slightly different number because you're in a different grid cell. But the farmer can see where he's in grid cells, and you can point around and sort of say, but you will get that answer in a second. It'll say, click, here's your demand. Oh, for the entire property. But then the farmer might say, oh, I'm not really irrigating that entire property from this well. I'm maybe only doing half of it, so let's say it's only 50 hectares. They can override and type in 50, because the tool will say your property is this big, and you'll say, well, I'm only irrigating something less, and puts that number in. And then immediately recalculates it again. And then you might say, well, I'm not really growing forage, and I really don't have a sprinkler system. I actually got blueberries, and I'm growing using a drip system. So there'll be two boxes here. You click on blueberries, you click on drip, and it immediately recalculates it for your area for blueberries and drip. So we're running the model for all these other crop types, so we know what the conversion factors will be in different regions. So you will have a really neat tool. Everybody can become water managers in a sense really quickly, because farmers can get that information, But so can Water Management Branch and the Ministry of the Environment. And so can anybody else go around and quickly click on things and educate yourself as to, hey, how much water do we need here? It's going to be a really cool tool. Contracts were issued this week, so it's all underway. We expect to have a beta version available by the end of January that we can play with. So kind of a neat thing that we're going to have done. Another neat thing that when Mike talks about the money that the partnership has in the bank and it's earmarked for projects, this is earmarked for project funds there, but it's earmarked for a project. So it seems like we have a lot of money, but it's all going to this project. So with that, who's the moderator today? Is that right now? Is that you, Kim?
That's me.
Back to you.
Better be like.
Oh, and you can get these reports on the Ag Water Demand Model. There's reports done for every region, and I did put up a slide about where we have it running, but it is running in a lot of parts of the province, not the whole province yet. We are expanding that every year. We're going to be going to doing the Central Kootenays this coming summer, and probably portions of the Caribou. I'm thinking about Port Alberni. We're going to do it there this summer as well, because we haven't done that. We've done the Nanaimo, Cowichan, and Courtney, so we're going to try to do Port Alberni. So then you'll have a report for the Port Alberni region. You'll have those numbers as well. But you can get to all the reports at Water Bucket, and they'll look kind of like this, and you can look them up and see what kind of data that we have. So with that, I'll turn it forward to Kay.
John, would you like to join